The history of Greece encompasses the history of the territory of the modern state of Greece, as well as that of the Greek people and the areas they ruled historically. The scope of Greek habitation and rule has varied much through the ages, and, as a result, the history of Greece is similarly elastic in what it includes. Each era has its own related sphere of interest. The first Greek-speaking tribes are generally thought to have arrived in the Greek mainland between the late 3rd and the first half of the 2nd millennium BC, probably between 1900 and 1600 BC. When the Mycenaeans invaded, the area was inhabited by various non-Greek-speaking, indigenous pre-Greek people, who practiced agriculture as they had done since the 7th millennium BC. At its geographical peak, Greek civilization spread from Greece to Egypt and to the Hindu Kush Mountains in Afghanistan. Since then, Greek minorities have remained in former Greek territories, and Greek emigrants have assimilated into differing societies across the globe. Today most Greeks live in the modern state of Greece and Cyprus. Prehistoric Greece. Neolithic. The Neolithic revolution reached Europe by way of Greece and the Balkans, beginning in the 10th millennium BC. Some Neolithic communities in southeastern Europe, such as Sisklo in Greece, were living in heavily fortified settlements of 3,000 to 4,000 people. The Greek Neolithic era ended with the arrival of the Bronze Age from Anatolia and the Near East, by the end of the 28th century BC. In about 2100 BC, the Proto-Indo-Europeans overran the Greek peninsula from the north and east. These Indo-Europeans, known as Mycenaeans, introduced the Greek language to present-day Greece. Bronze Age. Cycladic and Minoan civilization. One of the earliest civilizations to appear around Greece was the Minoan civilization in Crete, which lasted from about 2700 BC to 1450 BC, and the early Helladic period on the Greek mainland from circa 2800 BC to 2100 BC. Little specific information is known about the Minoans. They have been characterized as a pre-Indo-European people, apparently the linguistic ancestors of the Etio-Cretan speakers of classical antiquity, their language being encoded in the undeciphered linear script. They were primarily a mercantile people engaged in overseas trade, taking advantage of their land's rich natural resources. Timber was then an abundant natural resource that was commercially exploited and exported to nearby lands such as Cyprus, Syria, Egypt and the Aegean Islands. During the early Bronze Age, the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete held great promise for the future. The Mycenaean Greeks invaded Crete and adopted much of the Minoan culture they found on Crete. The Minoan civilization which preceded the Mycenaean civilization on Crete was revealed to the modern world by Sir Arthur Evans in 1900, when he purchased and then began excavating a site at Knossos. Mycenaean civilization. The Proto-Greeks are assumed to have arrived in the Greek peninsula during the late 3rd to early 2nd millennium BC. The migration of the Ionians and Aeolians resulted in Mycenaean Greece by the 16th century BC. The transition from pre-Greek to Greek culture appears to have been rather gradual. Some archaeologists have pointed to evidence that there was a significant amount of continuity of prehistoric economic, architectural, and social structures, suggesting that the transition between the Neolithic, Helladic and early Greek cultures may have continued without major rifts in social texture. On Crete, however, the Mycenaean invasion of around 1400 BC spelled the end of the Minoan civilization. Mycenaean Greece is the late Helladic Bronze Age civilization of ancient Greece. It lasted from the arrival of the Greeks in the Aegean around 1600 BC to the collapse of their Bronze Age civilization around 1100 BC. It is the historical setting of the epics of Homer and of most Greek mythology. The Mycenaean period takes its name from the archaeological site Mycenae in the northeastern Argolid, in the Peloponnesos of southern Greece. Athens, Pylos, Thebes, and Tiryns are also important Mycenaean sites. Mycenaean civilization was dominated by a warrior aristocracy. Around 1400 BC the Mycenaeans extended their control to Crete, center of the Minoan civilization, and adopted a form of the Minoan script called Linear A to write their early form of Greek. The Mycenaean era script is called Linear B. The Mycenaeans buried their nobles in beehive tombs, large circular burial chambers with a high vaulted roof and straight entry passage lined with stone. They often buried daggers or some other form of military equipment with the deceased. The nobility were often buried with gold masks, tiaras, armor and jeweled weapons. Mycenaeans were buried in a sitting position, and some of the nobility underwent mummification. Around 1100 BC the Mycenaean civilization collapsed. Numerous cities were sacked and the region entered what historians see as a dark age. During this period Greece experienced a decline in population and literacy. The Greeks themselves have traditionally blamed this decline on an invasion by another wave of Greek people, the Dorians, although there is scant archaeological evidence for this view. Early Iron Age. The Greek Dark Ages refers to the period of Greek history from the presumed Dorian invasion and end of the Mycenaean civilization in the 11th century BC to the rise of the first Greek city-states in the 9th century BC in the epics of Homer and earliest writings in alphabetic Greek in the 8th century BC. The collapse of the Mycenaean coincided with the fall of several other large empires in the Near East, most notably the Hittite and the Egyptian. The cause may be attributed to an invasion of the sea people wielding iron weapons. When the Dorians came down into Greece they also were equipped with superior iron weapons, easily dispersing the already weakened Mycenaeans. The period that follows these events is collectively known as the Greek Dark Ages. Kings ruled throughout this period until eventually they were replaced with an aristocracy, then still later, in some areas, an aristocracy within an aristocracy, an elite of the elite. Warfare shifted from a focus on cavalry to a great emphasis on infantry. Due to its cheapness of production and local availability, iron replaced bronze as the metal of choice in the manufacturing of tools and weapons. Slowly equality grew among the different sects of people, leading to the dethronement of the various kings and the rise of the family. At the end of this period of stagnation, the Greek civilization was engulfed in a renaissance that spread the Greek world as far as the Black Sea and Spain. Writing was relearned from the Phoenicians, eventually spreading north into Italy and the Gauls. Ancient Greece. Ancient Greece was an ancient civilization belonging to a period of Greek history that lasted from the Archaic period of the 8th to 6th centuries BC to the end of antiquity. In common usage it refers to all Greek history before the Roman Empire, but historians use the term more precisely. Some writers include the periods of the Minoan and Mycenaean civilizations, while others argue that these civilizations were so different from later Greek cultures that they should be classed separately. Traditionally, the ancient Greek period was taken to begin with the date of the first Olympic Games in 776 BC, but most historians now extend the term back to about 1000 BC. The traditional date for the end of the classical ancient Greek period is the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. The period that follows is classed as Hellenistic. Not everyone treats the classical ancient and Hellenic periods as distinct, however, and some writers treat the ancient Greek civilization as a continuum running until the advent of Christianity in the 3rd century AD. Ancient Greece is considered by most historians to be the foundational culture of Western civilization. Greek culture was a powerful influence in the Roman Empire, which carried a version of it to many parts of Europe. Ancient Greek civilization has been immensely influential on the language, politics, educational systems, philosophy, art and architecture of the modern world, particularly during the Renaissance in Western Europe and again during various neoclassical revivals in 18th and 19th century Europe and the Americas. Archaic Greece. In the 8th century BC, Greece began to emerge from the Dark Ages which followed the fall of the Mycenaean civilization. Literacy had been lost and Mycenaean script forgotten, but the Greeks adopted the Phoenician alphabet, modifying it to create the Greek alphabet. From about the 9th century BC, written records begin to appear. Greece was divided into many small self-governing communities, a pattern largely dictated by Greek geography, where every island, valley and plain is cut off from its neighbors by the sea or mountain ranges. The Archaic period can be understood as the Orientalizing period, when Greece was at the fringe, but not under the sway, of the budding Neo-Assyrian Empire. Greece adopted significant amounts of cultural elements from the Orient, in art as well as in religion and mythology. Archaeologically, Archaic Greece is marked by geometric pottery. Classical Greece. The basic unit of politics in ancient Greece was the polis, sometimes translated as city-state. Politics literally means the things of the polis. Each city was independent, at least in theory. Some cities might be subordinate to others, some might have had governments wholly dependent upon others, but the titularly supreme power in each city was located within that city. This meant that when Greece went to war, it took the form of an alliance going to war. It also gave ample opportunity for wars within Greece between different cities. Two major wars shaped the classical Greek world. The Persian Wars are recounted in Herodotus's histories. Ionian Greek cities revolted from the Persian Empire and were supported by some of the mainland cities, eventually led by Athens. The notable battles of this war include Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, and Platae. To prosecute the war and then to defend Greece from further Persian attack, Athens founded the Delian League in 477 BC. Initially, each city in the league would contribute ships and soldiers to a common army, but in time Athens allowed the smaller cities to contribute funds so that it could supply their quota of ships. Secession from the league could be punished. Following military reversals against the Persians, the treasury was moved from Delos to Athens, further strengthening the latter's control over the league. The Delian League was eventually referred to pejoratively as the Athenian Empire. In 458 BC, while the Persian Wars were still ongoing, war broke out between the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League, comprising Sparta and its allies. After some inconclusive fighting, the two sides signed a peace in 447 BC. That peace, it was stipulated, was to last 30 years, instead it held only until 431 BC, with the onset of the Peloponnesian War. Our main sources concerning this war are Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War and Xenophon's Hellenica. The war began over a dispute between Corcyra and Epidamnus. Corinth intervened on the Epidamnian side. Fearful lest Corinth capture the Corcyran navy, Athens intervened. It prevented Corinth from landing on Corcyra at the Battle of Sybota, laid siege to Potidæa, and forbade all commerce with Corinth's closely situated ally, Megara. There was disagreement among the Greeks as to which party violated the treaty between the Delian and Peloponnesian leagues, as Athens was technically defending a new ally. The Corinthians turned to Sparta for aid. Fearing the growing might of Athens, and witnessing Athens' willingness to use it against the Megarians, Sparta declared the treaty to have been violated and the Peloponnesian War began in earnest. The first stage of the war lasted until 421 BC with the signing of the Peace of Nissus. The Athenian general Pericles recommended that his city fight a defensive war, avoiding battle against the superior land forces led by Sparta, and importing everything needful by maintaining its powerful navy. Athens would simply outblast Sparta, whose citizens feared to be out of their city for long lest the Helots revolt. This strategy required that Athens endure regular sieges, and in 430 BC it was visited with an awful plague that killed about a quarter of its people, including Pericles. With Pericles gone, less conservative elements gained power in the city and Athens went on the offensive. It captured 400 Spartan hoplites at the Battle of Pylos. This represented a significant fraction of the Spartan fighting force which the latter decided it could not afford to lose. Meanwhile, Athens had suffered humiliating defeats at Delium and Amphipolis. The Peace of Nissus concluded with Sparta recovering its hostages and Athens recovering the city of Amphipolis. Those who signed the Peace of Nissus in 421 BC swore to uphold it for 50 years. The second stage of the Peloponnesian War began in 415 BC when Athens embarked on the Sicilian expedition to support an ally attacked by Syracuse and to conquer Sicily. Initially, Sparta was reluctant, but Alcibiades, the Athenian general who had argued for the Sicilian expedition, defected to the Spartan cause upon being accused of grossly impious acts and convinced them that they could not allow Athens to subjugate Syracuse. The campaign ended in disaster for the Athenians. Athens' Ionian possessions rebelled with the support of Sparta, as advised by Alcibiades. In 411 BC, An oligarchical revolt in Athens held out the chance for peace, but the Athenian navy, which remained committed to the democracy, refused to accept the change and continued fighting in Athens' name. The navy recalled Alcibiades and made him its head. The oligarchy in Athens collapsed and Alcibiades reconquered what had been lost. In 407 BC, Alcibiades was replaced following a minor naval defeat at the Battle of Notium. The Spartan general Lysander, having fortified his city's naval power, won victory after victory. Following the Battle of Arginazi, which Athens won but was prevented by bad weather from rescuing some of his sailors, Athens executed or exiled 8 of its top naval commanders. Lysander followed with a crashing blow at the Battle of Aegisptami in 405 BC, which almost destroyed the Athenian fleet. Athens surrendered 1 year later, ending the Peloponnesian War. The war had left devastation in its wake. Discontent with the Spartan hegemony that followed, see Treaty of Antalcidas, induced the Thebans to attack. Their general, Epaminondas, crushed Sparta at the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, inaugurating a period of Theban dominance in Greece. In 346 BC, unable to prevail in its 10-year war with Phocea, Thebes called upon Philip II of Macedon for aid. Macedon quickly forced the city-states into being united by the League of Corinth, which led to the conquering of the Persian Empire, and the Hellenistic Age had begun. Hellenistic Greece. The Hellenistic period of Greek history begins with the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and ends with the annexation of the Greek peninsula and islands by Rome in 146 BC. Although the establishment of Roman rule did not break the continuity of Hellenistic society and culture, which remained essentially unchanged until the advent of Christianity, it did mark the end of Greek political independence. During the Hellenistic period, the importance of Greece proper within the Greek-speaking world declined sharply. The great centers of Hellenistic culture were Alexandria and Antioch, capitals of Ptolemaic Egypt and Seleucid Syria. Athens and her allies revolted against Macedon upon hearing that Alexander had died, but were defeated within a year in the Lamian War. Meanwhile, a struggle for power broke out among Alexander's generals, which resulted in the breakup of his empire and the establishment of a number of new kingdoms. Ptolemy was left with Egypt, Seleucus with the Levant, Mesopotamia, and points east. Control of Greece, Thrace, and Anatolia was contested, but by 298 BC the Antigonid dynasty had supplanted the Antipatride. Macedonian control of the city-states was intermittent, with a number of revolts. Athens, Rhodes, Pergamum and other Greek states retained substantial independence, and joined the Aetolian League as a means of defending it and restoring democracy in their states, whereas they saw Macedon as a tyrannical kingdom because of the fact they had not adopted democracy. The Achaean League, while nominally subject to the Ptolemies, was in effect independent, and controlled most of southern Greece. Sparta also remained independent, but generally refused to join any league. In 267 BC, Ptolemy II persuaded the Greek cities to revolt against Macedon, in what became the Chmonidian War, after the Athenian leader Chmonides. The cities were defeated and Athens lost her independence and her democratic institutions. This marked the end of Athens as a political actor, although it remained the largest, wealthiest and most cultivated city in Greece. In 225 BC Macedon defeated the Egyptian fleet at Kos and brought the Aegean Islands, except Rhodes, under its rule as well. Sparta remained hostile to the Achaeans, and in 227 BC invaded Achaea and seized control of the league. The remaining Achaeans preferred distant Macedon to nearby Sparta, and allied with the former. In 222 BC the Macedonian army defeated the Spartans and annexed their site, the first time Sparta had ever been occupied by a different state. Philip V of Macedon was the last Greek ruler with both the talent and the opportunity to unite Greece and preserve its independence against the ever-increasing power of Rome. Under his auspices, the Peace of Naupactus brought conflict between Macedon and the Greek leagues to an end, and at this time he controlled all of Greece except Athens, Rhodes and Pergamum. In 215 BC, however, Philip formed an alliance with Rome's enemy Carthage. Rome promptly lured the Achaean cities away from their nominal loyalty to Philip, and formed alliances with Rhodes and Pergamum, now the strongest power in Asia Minor. The First Macedonian War broke out in 212 BC, and ended inconclusively in 205 BC, but Macedon was now marked as an enemy of Rome. In 202 BC, Rome defeated Carthage, and was free to turn her attention eastwards. In 198 BC, the Second Macedonian War broke out because Rome saw Macedon as a potential ally of the Seleucid Empire, the greatest power in the east. Philip's allies in Greece deserted him, and in 197 BC he was decisively defeated at the Battle of Cynocephalae by the Roman proconsul Titus Quinctius Flaminius. Luckily for the Greeks, Flaminius was a moderate man and an admirer of Greek culture. Philip had to surrender his fleet and become a Roman ally, but was otherwise spared. At the Isthmian Games in 196 BC, Flaminius declared all the Greek cities free, although Roman garrisons were placed at Corinth and Chalcis. But the freedom promised by Rome was an illusion. All the cities except Rhodes were enrolled in a new league which Rome ultimately controlled, and aristocratic constitutions were favored and actively promoted. Roman Greece. Militarily, Greece itself declined to the point that the Romans conquered the land, though Greek culture would in turn conquer Roman life. Although the period of Roman rule in Greece is conventionally dated as starting from the sacking of Corinth by the Roman Lucius Mummius in 146 BC, Macedonia had already come under Roman control with the defeat of its king, Perseus, by the Roman Aemilius Paulus at Pydna in 168 BC. The Romans divided the region into 4 smaller republics, and in 146 BC Macedonia officially became a province, with its capital at Thessalonica. The rest of the Greek city-states gradually and eventually paid homage to Rome, ending their de jure autonomy as well. The Romans left local administration to the Greeks without making any attempt to abolish traditional political patterns. The Agora in Athens continued to be the center of civic and political life. Caracalla's decree in AD 212, the Constitutio Antoniniana, extended citizenship outside Italy to all free adult men in the entire Roman Empire, effectively raising provincial populations to equal status with the city of Rome itself. The importance of this decree is historical, not political. It set the basis for integration where the economic and judicial mechanisms of the state could be applied throughout the Mediterranean as was once done from Latium into all Italy. In practice, of course, integration did not take place uniformly. Societies already integrated with Rome, such as Greece, were favored by this decree, in comparison with those far away too poor or just too alien such as Britain, Palestine or Egypt. Caracalla's decree did not set in motion the processes that led to the transfer of power from Italy and the West to Greece and the East, but rather accelerated them, setting the foundations for the millennium-long rise of Greece, in the form of the Eastern Roman Empire, as a major power in Europe and the Mediterranean in the Middle Ages. Byzantine Empire. The history of the East Roman or Byzantine Empire is described by Byzantinist August Heisenberg as the history of the Christianized Roman Empire of the Greek nation. The division of the empire into East and West and the subsequent collapse of the Western Roman Empire were developments that constantly accentuated the position of the Greeks in the empire and eventually allowed them to become identified with it altogether. The leading role of Constantinople began when Constantine the Great turned Byzantium into the new capital of the Roman Empire, from then on to be known as Constantinople, placing the city at the center of Hellenism, a beacon for the Greeks that lasted to the modern era. The figures of Constantine the Great and Justinian dominated during 324–610. Assimilating the Roman tradition, the emperors sought to offer the basis for later developments and for the formation of the Byzantine Empire. Efforts to secure the borders of the empire and to restore the Roman territories marked the early centuries. At the same time, the definitive formation and establishment of the Orthodox doctrine, but also a series of conflicts resulting from heresies that developed within the boundaries of the empire marked the early period of Byzantine history. In the first period of the Middle Byzantine era, the empire was attacked both by old enemies as well as by new ones, appearing for the first time in history. The main characteristic of this period was that the enemy attacks were not localized to the border areas of the state, but they were extended deep beyond, even threatening the capital itself. At the same time, These attacks lost their periodical and temporary character and became permanent settlements that transformed into new states, hostile to Byzantium. Those states were referred by the Byzantines as Sclavinias. Changes were also observed in the internal structure of the empire, which was dictated by both external and internal conditions. The predominance of the small free farmers, the expansion of the military estates and the development of the system of themes, brought to completion developments that had started in the previous period. Changes were noted also in the sector of administration. The administration and society had become immiscibly Greek, while the restoration of orthodoxy after the iconoclast movement allowed the successful resumption of missionary action among neighboring peoples and their placement within the sphere of Byzantine cultural influence. During this period the state was geographically reduced and economically damaged, since it lost wealth-producing regions. However, it obtained greater lingual, dogmatic and cultural homogeneity. From the late 8th century, the empire began to recover from the devastating impact of successive invasions, and the reconquest of Greece began. Greeks from Sicily and Asia Minor were brought in as settlers. The Slavs were either driven out or assimilated and the Sclavinias were eliminated. By the middle of the 9th century, Greece was Greek again, and the cities began to recover due to improved security and the restoration of effective central control. Economic prosperity. When the Byzantine Empire was rescued from a period of crisis by the resolute leadership of the three Kimnoi emperors Alexios, John and Manuel in the 12th century, Greece prospered. Recent research has revealed that this period was a time of significant growth in the rural economy, with rising population levels and extensive tracts of new agricultural land being brought into production. The widespread construction of new rural churches is a strong indication that prosperity was being generated even in remote areas. A steady increase in population led to a higher population density, and there is good evidence that the demographic increase was accompanied by the revival of towns. According to Alan Harvey in his book A Euro Unregistered Trademark Economic Expansion in the Byzantine Empire 900 Euro 1200 Euro Unregistered Trademark A Euro Unregistered Trademark, towns expanded significantly in the 12th century. Archaeological evidence shows an increase in the size of urban settlements, together with a Euro notable upsurge A Euro Unregistered Trademark in new towns. Archaeological evidence tells us that many of the medieval towns, including Athens, Thessaloniki, Thebes and Corinth, experienced a period of rapid and sustained growth, starting in the 11th century and continuing until the end of the 12th century. The growth of the towns attracted the Venetians, and this interest in trade appears to have further increased economic prosperity in Greece. Certainly, the Venetians and others were active traders in the ports of the Holy Land, and they made a living out of shipping goods between the Crusader kingdoms of Outremer and the West while also trading extensively with Byzantium and Egypt. Artistic revival. The 11th and 12th centuries are said to be the golden age of Byzantine art in Greece. Many of the most important Byzantine churches in and around Athens, for example, were built during these 2 centuries, and this reflects the growth of urbanization in Greece during this period. There was also a revival in the mosaic art with artists showing great interest in depicting natural landscapes with wild animals and scenes from the hunt. Mosaics became more realistic and vivid, with an increased emphasis on depicting three-dimensional forms. With its love of luxury and passion for color, the art of this age delighted in the production of masterpieces that spread the fame of Byzantium throughout the Christian world. Beautiful silks from the workshops of Constantinople also portrayed in dazzling color animals lions, elephants, eagles, and griffines confronting each other, or representing emperors gorgeously arrayed on horseback or engaged in the chase. The eyes of many patrons were attracted and the economy of Greece grew. In the provinces, regional schools of architecture began producing many distinctive styles that drew on a range of cultural influences. All this suggests that there was an increased demand for art, with more people having access to the necessary wealth to commission and pay for such work. Yet the marvelous expansion of Byzantine art during this period, one of the most remarkable facts in the history of the empire, did not stop there. From the 10th to the 12th century, Byzantium was the main source of inspiration for the West. By their style, arrangement, and iconography, the mosaics of St. Mark's at Venice and of the cathedral at Torcello clearly show their Byzantine origin. Similarly, those of the Palatine Chapel, the Martirana at Palermo, and the Cathedral of Cefalù, together with the vast decoration of the cathedral at Monreale, prove the influence of Byzantium in the Norman court of Sicily in the 12th century. Hispano-Moorish art was unquestionably derived from the Byzantine. Romanesque art owes much to the East, from which it borrowed not only its decorative forms but the plan of some of its buildings, as is proved, for instance, by the domed churches of southwestern France. Princes of Kiev, Venetian doges, abbots of Monte Cassino, merchants of Amalfi, and the Norman kings of Sicily all looked to Byzantium for artists or works of art. Such was the influence of Byzantine art in the 12th century, that Russia, Venice, southern Italy and Sicily all virtually became provincial centers dedicated to its production. The Fourth Crusade and after. The year 1204 marks the beginning of the late Byzantine period, when probably the most important event for the empire occurred. Constantinople was lost for the Greek people for the first time, and the empire was conquered by Latin crusaders and would be replaced by a new Latin one, for 57 years. In addition, the period of Latin occupation decisively influenced the empire's internal development, as elements of feudality entered aspects of Byzantine life. In 1261 the Greek Empire was divided between the former Greek Byzantine Komnenos dynasty members and Palaiologos dynasty ruling the despotate of the Morea. After the gradual weakening of the structures of the Byzantine state and the reduction of its land from Turkish invasions, came the fall of the Byzantine Empire at the hands of the Ottomans. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 is considered the end of the Byzantine period. Even after the Ottoman conquest, various areas remained under Venetian control, such as the Kingdom of Candia, the Venetian Ionian Islands, various Aegean islands or short-lived occupied lands. Ottoman rule. When the Ottomans arrived, two Greek migrations occurred. The first migration entailed the Greek intelligentsia migrating to Western Europe and influencing the advent of the Renaissance. The second migration entailed Greeks leaving the plains of the Greek peninsula and resettling in the mountains. The millet system contributed to the ethnic cohesion of Orthodox Greeks by segregating the various peoples within the Ottoman Empire based on religion. The Greeks living in the plains during Ottoman domination were either Christians who dealt with the burdens of foreign rule or crypto-Christians. Some Greeks became crypto-Christians to avoid heavy taxes and at the same time express their identity by maintaining their ties to the Greek Orthodox Church. However, Greeks who converted to Islam and were not crypto-Christians were deemed Turks in the eyes of Orthodox Greeks, even if they didn't adopt Turkish language. The Ottomans ruled Greece until the early 19th century. Modern Greek state. In the early months of 1821, the Greeks declared their independence but did not achieve it until 1829. The great powers first shared the same view concerning the necessity of preserving the status quo of the Ottoman Empire, but soon changed their stance. Scores of non-Greeks volunteered to fight for the cause, including Lord Byron. On October 20, 1827, a combined British, French and Russian naval force destroyed the Ottoman and Egyptian armada. The Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ioannis Kapodistrias, himself a Greek, returned home as president of the new republic. The first capital of the independent Greece was Aegina and the second was Nafplio. After his assassination, the European powers helped turn Greece into a monarchy. The first king, Otto, came from Bavaria and the second, George I, from Denmark. King Otto, in 1834 transferred the capital to Athens. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, Greece sought to enlarge its boundaries to include the ethnic Greek population of the Ottoman Empire. Greece played a peripheral role in the Crimean War. When Russia attacked the Ottoman Empire in 1853, Greek leaders saw an opportunity to expand north and south into Ottoman areas that had a Christian majority. However, Greece did not coordinate its plans with Russia, did not declare war, and received no outside military or financial support. The French and British seized its major port and effectively neutralized the Greek army. Greek efforts to cause insurrections were failures that were easily crushed by the Ottoman army. Greece was not invited to the peace conference and made no gains out of the war. The frustrated Greek leadership blamed the king for failing to take advantage of the situation. His popularity plunged and he was later forced to abdicate. The Ionian Islands were returned by Britain upon the arrival of the new King George I in 1863 and Thessaly was ceded by the Ottomans. As a result of the Balkan Wars of 1912 (13 Epirus, southern Macedonia, Crete and the Aegean Islands were annexed into the Kingdom of Greece. Another enlargement followed in 1947, when Greece annexed the Dodecanese Islands from Italy. Modernization. In the late 19th century, modernization transformed the social structure of Greece. The population grew rapidly, putting heavy pressure on the system of small farms with low productivity. Overall, the density of population more than doubled from 41 persons per square mile in 1829 to 114 in 1912. One response was emigration to the United States, with 250,000 people leaving between 1906 and the start of the World War in 1914. Entrepreneurs found numerous business opportunities in the retail and restaurant sectors of American cities. Some sent money back to their families, others returned with hundreds of dollars, enough to purchase a farm or a small business in the old village. The urban population tripled from 8% in 1853 to 24% in 1907. Athens grew from a village of 6,000 people in 1834, when it became the capital, to 63,000 in 1879, 111,000 in 1896, and 167,000 in 1907. In Athens and other cities, men arriving from rural areas set up workshops and stores, creating a middle class. They joined with bankers, professional men, university students, and military officers, to demand reform and modernization of the political and economic system. Athens became the center of the merchant marine, which quadrupled in size from 250,000 tons in 1875 to more than 1 million tons in 1915. As the cities modernized, businessmen adopted the latest styles of West European architecture. World War I and Greco-Turkish War. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 produced a split in Greek politics, with King Constantine I, an admirer of Germany, calling for neutrality, while Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos pushed for Greece to join on the side of the Allies, aiming to the realization of the Magali idea. The conflict between monarchists and the Venizelists sometimes resulted into open warfare and became known as the National Schism. In 1916 the Allies forced Constantine to abdicate in favor of his son Alexander, and Venizelos returned as premier. Following victory the war, the great powers agreed that the Ottoman cities of Smyrna and its hinterland, both of which had large Greek populations, be handed over to Greece. Greek troops occupied Smyrna in 1919, and in 1920 the Treaty of Sèvres was signed by the Ottoman government, which stipulated that in 5 years' time a plebiscite would be held in Smyrna on whether the region would join Greece. However, the Turkish nationalists, led by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, overthrew the Ottoman government and organized a military campaign against the Greek troops, resulting in the Greco-Turkish War. A major Greek offensive ground to halt in 1921, and by 1922 the Greek troops were in retreat. The Turkish forces recaptured Smyrna on September 9, 1922, and 4 days afterwards a great fire broke out in the city, incinerating the Greek and Armenian quarters. The war was concluded by the Treaty of Lausanne, according to which there was to be a population exchange between Greece and Turkey on the basis of religion. Over 1 million Orthodox Christians left Turkey in exchange for 400,000 Muslims from Greece. The events of 1919–1922 are regarded in Greece as a particularly calamitous period of history. Between 1914 and 1923, an estimated 750,000 to 900,000 Greeks died at the hands of the Ottoman Turks, in what many scholars have termed a genocide. World War II. Despite the country's numerically small and ill-equipped armed forces, Greece made a decisive contribution to the Allied efforts in World War II. At the start of the war, Greece sided with the Allies and refused the given to Italian demands. Italy invaded Greece by way of Albania on October 28, 1940, but Greek troops repelled the invaders after a bitter struggle. This marked the first Allied victory in the war. Primarily to secure his strategic southern flank, German dictator Adolf Hitler reluctantly stepped in and launched the Battle of Greece. Axis units from Germany, Bulgaria, and Italy successfully invaded Greece, through Yugoslavia, forcing out the Greek defenders. On May 20, 1941, the Germans attempted to seize Crete with a large attack by paratroops with the aim of reducing the threat of a counter-offensive by Allied forces in Egypt, but faced heavy resistance. The Greek campaign might have delayed German military plans against Soviet Union, and it is argued that had the German invasion of the Soviet Union started on May 20, 1941 instead of June 22, 1941, the Nazi assault against the Soviet Union might have succeeded. The heavy losses of German paratroopers led the Germans to launch no further large-scale air invasions. During the years of occupation of Greece by Nazi Germany, thousands of Greeks died in direct combat, in concentration camps, or of starvation. The occupiers murdered the greater part of the Jewish community despite efforts by Christian Greeks to shelter the Jews. The economy of Greece was devastated. When the Soviet army began its drive across Romania in August 1944, the German army in Greece began withdrawing north and northwestward from Greece to avoid being cut off in Greece. Hence, the German occupation of Greece ended in October 1944. The resistance group ELAS seized control of Athens on October 12, 1944. The insurrection was defeated by British troops who entered Athens at October 14, 1944. Goulter summarizes the devastation done to Greece during the war. Between 1941 and 1945, over 8% of the Greek population had died. Some 2,000 villages and small towns had been razed to the ground. Starvation was widespread due to the destruction of crops and worsened in many parts of Greece after liberation when agricultural laborers migrated to urban centers to escape politically inspired violence in the countryside. Trade either internally or externally had all but ceased. Most of Greece's merchant marine lay at the bottom of the sea. And motorized transport had been confiscated by the Axis occupiers. Greek Civil War. The Greek Civil War was fought between 1944 and 1949 in Greece between the Greek governmental and British forces. Funding for the government came from Britain and the US. The insurgents, the military branch of the Greek Communist Party. According to some analysts on the left, it represented the first example of a post-war West interference in the political situation of a foreign country. The victory of the British and later US-supported government forces led to American funding through the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan and to Greece's membership in NATO and helped to define the ideological balance of power in the Aegean for the entire Cold War. The Civil War consisted on one side of the armed forces of the post-war non-Marxist Greek administrations, and on the other, communist-led forces, and key members of the former resistance organization, the leadership of which was controlled by the Communist Party of Greece. The first phase of the Civil War occurred in 1942–1944. Marxist and non-Marxist resistance groups fought each other in a fratricidal conflict to establish the leadership of the Greek resistance movement. In the second phase, the ascendant communists, in military control of most of Greece, confronted the returning Greek government in exile, which had been formed under Western Allied auspices in Cairo and originally included 6 KKE-affiliated ministers. In the third phase, guerrilla forces controlled by KKE fought against the internationally recognized Greek government, which was formed after elections boycotted by KKE. Although the involvement of KKE in the uprisings was universally known, the party remained legal until 1948, continuing to coordinate attacks from its Athens offices until proscription. The Civil War left Greece with a legacy of political polarization. As a result, Greece also entered into alliance with the United States and joined NATO, while relationships with its communist northern neighbors, both pro-Soviet and neutral, became strained. Post-war recovery and military junta. In the 1950s and 1960s, Greece developed rapidly, initially with the help of the U.S. Marshall Plan's grants and loans, and later through growth in the tourism sector, leading to the Greek economic miracle. New attention was given to women's rights, and in 1952 suffrage for women was guaranteed in the Constitution, full constitutional equality following, and Lina Tsaldari becoming the first female minister that decade. In 1967, the Greek military seized power in a coup d'état, overthrew the centre-right government of Panagiotis Kanellopoulos. It established the Greek military junta of 1967 to 1974, which became known as the Ra copyright regime of the colonels. In 1973, the Ra copyright regime abolished the Greek monarchy. In 1974, dictator Papadopoulos denied help to the U.S. After a second coup that year, Colonel Ioannidis was appointed as the new head of state. Ioannidis was responsible for the 1974 coup against President Makarios of Cyprus. The coup became the pretext for the first wave of the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1974. The Cyprus events and the outcry following a bloody suppression of Athens' Polytechnic uprising in Athens led to the implosion of the military Ra copyright regime. An exiled politician, Konstantinos Karamanlis, returned and became interim prime minister on July 23, 1974, and later gained re-election for 2 further terms at the head of the conservative Nea Demokratia party. In August 1974, Greek forces withdrew from the integrated military structure of NATO in protest at the Turkish occupation of northern Cyprus. Restoration of democracy. In 1974, a referendum voted 69% to 31% to confirm the deposition of King Constantine II. A democratic republican constitution came into force. Another previously exiled politician, Andreas Papandreou, also returned and founded the socialist Pan-Hellenic Socialist Movement Party, which won the elections in 1981 and dominated the country's political course for almost 2 decades. Since the restoration of democracy, the stability and economic prosperity of Greece have grown remarkably. Greece rejoined NATO in 1980. Greece joined the European Union in 1981 and adopted the euro as its currency in 2001. New infrastructure, funds from the EU and growing revenues from tourism, shipping, services, light industry and the telecommunications industry have brought Greeks an unprecedented standard of living. Tensions continue to exist between Greece and Turkey over Cyprus and the delimitation of borders in the Aegean Sea, but relations have considerably thawed following successive earthquakes, first in Turkey and then in Greece, and an outpouring of sympathy and generous assistance by ordinary Greeks and Turks. Economic crisis of 2009 2014. From late 2009, fears of a sovereign debt crisis developed among investors concerning Greece's ability to meet its debt obligations due to strong increase in government debt levels. This led to a crisis of confidence, indicated by a widening of bond yield spreads and risk insurance on credit default swaps compared to other countries, most importantly Germany. Downgrading of Greek government debt to junk bonds created alarm in financial markets. On May 2, 2010, the Eurozone countries and the International Monetary Fund agreed on a €110 billion loan for Greece, conditional on the implementation of harsh austerity measures. In October 2011, Eurozone leaders also agreed on a proposal to write off 50% of Greek debt owed to private creditors, increasing the EFSF to about €1 trillion and requiring European banks to achieve 9% capitalization to reduce the risk of contagion to other countries. These austerity measures have proved extremely unpopular with the Greek public, precipitating demonstrations and civil unrest. See also, History of Crete, History of the Cyclades, History of Thessaly, History of Athens, History of Thessaloniki, History of the Greek language, Timeline of Ancient Greece, Timeline of Modern Greek History, Lists, List of Ancient Greeks, List of Ancient Greek cities, List of Kings of Greece, List of Presidents of Greece, List of Prime Ministers of Greece, General, History of the Balkans, Intermediate Region, History of Europe, Further reading, Boardman, John. A.L. The Oxford History of Greece and the Hellenistic World. Brewer, David. Greece, The Hidden Centuries, Turkish Rule from the Fall of Constantinople to Greek Independence. IB Tauris. PA 308. Byrne, A.R. The Penguin History of Greece. Cartledge, Paul. The Cambridge Illustrated History of Ancient Greece. Chadwick, John. The Mycenaean World. Cambridge UP. ISBN A0-521-29037-6. Demand, Nancy H. A History of Ancient Greece in its Mediterranean Context. Grant, Michael. A Social History of Greece and Rome. Koliopoulos, John S. Veramis, Thanos M. Modern Greece, A History Since 1821. Pomeroy, Sarah B. A Brief History of Ancient Greece, Politics, Society and Culture. Woodhouse, C. M. Modern Greece, A Short History. References, Chadwick, John. The Mycenaean World. Cambridge UP. ISBN A0-521-29037-6. Mountjoy, P.A. Mycenaean Decorated Pottery, A Guide to Identification. Studies in Mediterranean Archaeology 73. Gar paragraph Taborg, Paulustra paragraph Miss Forlag. ISBN A91-86098-32-2. Malonas, George E. Mycenaean The Mycenaean Age. Princeton UP. ISBN A0-691-03523-7. Podzuite, Christian. Die McNeish Welt und Troja. In Haar Currency NSEL, Bizarre 1/4 Dost Europas Zwischen 1600 und 1000 v. CHRPPA 65 €88. Roebuck, Cal. The World of Ancient Times. New York, Charles Scribner's Sons. Taylor, Lord William. The Mycenaeans. Revised edition. London, Thames and Hudson. ISBN A0-500-27586-6. Latach, Joachim. Between Troy and Homer. The So-Called Dark Ages in Greece. Storia, Poesia e Pensiero nel Mondo Antico. Study in an Ordem Giganti. Rome, Vakalopoulos, Apostolis. The Greek Nation, 1453–1669. Rutgers University Press. Footnotes. External links, A visual illustrated timeline of the history of Greece, Jeremy B. Rutter, The Prehistoric Archaeology of the Aegean Chronology, History, Bibliography, History of Greece, Primary Documents, A Short History of Greece.